Okay, hi everybody. My name's Jamie Dunn, and welcome to our webinar on getting started with undergraduate study in the U.S. I work for the US-UK Fulbright Commission. I am a communication officer and educational advisor. So the purpose of this webinar is just to get us started thinking about the U.S. admissions process. It by no way goes in depth into the application process. And so what I'd like to ask is use this as a tool again to think about, is US study right for me? Know generally about the application components and how Fulbright can help. And then to go onto our website where really that's where the information lies that goes in depth into the admissions process. So let's get started on the presentation. A little bit about the Fulbright Commission. The US-UK Fulbright Commission was founded in the aftermath of World War II by US Senator Fulbright. And after World War II, he thought, what better way to help prevent a World War III than to initiate more cultural exchanges between countries. And so the mission of the Fulbright Commission is to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. There are over 150 Fulbright Commissions around the world, always between the US and another country. Now, we support educational exchange at the US-UK Fulbright Commission in two ways. The first way is through our awards program. We offer scholarships for postgraduate study and research. The second way is through our advisory service. So we offer advice for anyone interested at any level of US study, whether it be undergraduate, short-term, postgraduate, etc. Our advisory service is also part of the Education USA network of advising centers worldwide. We're also a not-for-profit, and we're funded by both the US and UK governments. We're also the only official government-recognized source of US study information in the UK. Okay, so let's get started with the meat of the presentation. First, some terminology differences. We have a whole page about terminology differences between the US and UK on our website under the Getting Started section. But just to note a few important ones, that as you're looking and investigating US universities and going onto their websites, you may see some of these terms, and we don't want you getting confused and getting discouraged. So just to go over an important few, college, university, institute, school. All of these words are actually used interchangeably with university. Class or course, you might be more familiar with the term module. A public university, for example, is a university that has received state funding, so very different than a public school in the US. It refers to something very different than a public school in the UK. A public university, you may find, it tends to be a bit larger than private universities. They also may have more students, a larger student population, and also within that student population, more students from, of course, within that state. So why study in the US? This is an important question, something you should definitely ask yourself if you're a teacher tuning in. It's something that you should ask your students you're advising, and they should have good reasons. Why are you thinking about the US? Is it a good fit for you? And I'm going to go over some top reasons why we've asked other UK students why they've considered the US. And when I say we've asked other students, we actually conducted a survey of British students before they headed over to the States. So British students who successfully applied, gotten in, and decided to go over to the US for a university degree. And we asked them, why did you decide to go? And 91% of them reported that the quality and reputation of US universities was an important factor to them. So US universities are on the cutting edge research. They're respected worldwide, and so I think that's an important point as you're considering US study and obtaining a US degree, and it was important to the students who decided to go over. Going along with this point, you should also keep in mind that there are over 4,000 US institutions that offer undergraduate degrees. And with so many universities to choose from, you're more likely to find the institution that's a good fit for you academics-wise, location, that has the right funding, the right student activities, etc. So you're really going to be spoiled for choice. Another reason students consider US study is, of course, the opportunity to experience that vibrant US campus life. You'll find that most US campuses have probably at least 100 different student activities to get involved in, whether they be something social, so maybe you're looking to interact with other international students or US students, maybe through an intramural sports league or an arts club or a comedy club, or maybe you want to join something. I mean, I've seen some pretty silly ones, but a club like the Ninja Club, or I've seen at some universities a Quidditch League for some of you Harry Potter fans. So really anything under the sun, and if there isn't an activity, universities welcome students to get a few friends together, go to the Student Services office, and start their own club. So a great way to socialize with your peers. Another reason you might want to consider joining an on-campus activity is to add something to your CV. Maybe you decide to take the marketing position for the International Student Society, or you decide you want to volunteer or be the president of the Philosophy Society or engineering fraternity. Lots of ways that you can gain work experience and organizational skills and something to put onto your CV even before you graduate. And in conversations with UK students, they really do say that being on a US campus, because the students around them were getting so involved, they found themselves getting really involved. Also, US universities really encourage their students to get involved on campus. They believe learning does not stop, at the four walls of a classroom. It doesn't just take place within the library or lab. It takes place through social learning and social activities and volunteering and cheering on, the American football team and etc. So really being interactive. A third reason to consider U.S. study is the flexibility of a U.S. undergraduate degree and the liberal arts curriculum. Also to consider the fact that there is more of a focus on teaching. So what do I mean by liberal arts? It's something that a term you might see as you come across as you investigate U.S. institutions. And what it means is for most U.S. universities, to some extent or another, so some really emphasize this, whereas maybe others less so, emphasize that students have a well-rounded education. And what it basically means is that through the course of your degree at the institution, they're looking for you to take classes or modules outside of your main area of study. And they'll say they will require you, they'll say, if you want a degree from our university, during your time here, you need to take a certain amount of modules outside of your main area of study. And these modules would be known as general education classes, usually on most campuses. And what that means, for example, is if you are an English major, of course a lot of your classes are going to be English classes, but they might say in the time that you're with us, we'd like you to take at least one science class, or one art history class, or one psychology class. And again, this varies between campuses to what extent they require you to take classes outside of your main area of study. And the reason they do this is, well, a couple of reasons actually. First, again, they want well-rounded graduates. They believe even an English major after graduation at some point is going to have to do basic math or have to know some basic science or psychology. So they want well-rounded graduates. They also do this because they want students to be able to explore subjects that maybe they had to drop at A-levels, or maybe they have never had a chance to experience before. Maybe you take a Economics 101, an introductory class to economics, that you never had a chance to take economics, and you realize, wow, I really like this. I actually want to switch majors. I no longer want to be an English major. And if you do it within your first or second year, it usually means you can still graduate on time. It's a pretty smooth process to switch majors, and again, that flexibility. Also going along with liberal arts, if you're worried that you're, that English major and you're thinking, oh no, I have to take a science or a math class, they do offer you a range of options. So if they say to you, we'd like you to take a science class, they will say you can choose from one of X number of classes, and you'll find some pretty basic classes available, again, for non-science majors, just so they get a taste of a different subject. They also, with liberal arts, allow you to what's known as double major. So if you have two main areas of study, two things you really want to go in depth with. For example, maybe you're an international business major, but you really want to bring up your language skills, and you decide to take Japanese as your other major, you can do so. So to have two main areas of study. You can also do what's known as major and minor, which means you have one main area of study, but maybe you want a flavor or a taste of a subject and have that qualification recognized when you graduate. So for example, maybe you're studying international relations and you decide to minor in a language like German and take 4 or 5 classes in that subject. Also, there's more of a focus on teaching, so you'll find yourself more likely inside the classroom, spending more time inside the classroom in the US than you would in the UK. So if that appeals to you, if being in a classroom where the teacher or professor is probably a bit more interactive with the students, that you're interactive with your peers, if that appeals to you, then US study may be a good fit for you. Also, one last important note that I think is important to consider is that if you decide, I took A-levels, I'm not happy with what I took, I don't know what I want to major in, I don't know what I want to do at university, it's okay to apply undecided, undeclared sometimes it's called. And that means that after you've taken a few of these general education classes, your first or second semester, then you can decide, okay, I really like economics, I'm going to go ahead and major in that. So it gives you that flexibility there as well. Another reason to consider U.S. study is actually the funding opportunities available. This may raise a few eyebrows because I think when people think of the U.S., they associate it with higher tuition and fees. And in some cases, perhaps that's the case. Perhaps U.S. study is more expensive, and in some cases not. But I think the important thing to walk away from this point with is really that because U.S. students have been paying fees for a long time, a scholarship and funding culture has really developed within the U.S. So that can come in the shape of a few different forms. Just to note, I'm not going to go in-depth with funding. There's a ton of information available on our website about it. But just for the purposes of this presentation, I should note that first, there's university funding, and this may be in the form of need-based aid. So the university decides, based on the household income of your family, if you get into that university, they're going to meet a certain amount of aid that they think you've demonstrated this need in order to come to their institution. They may offer merit-based scholarships, so based on how competitive you are as a student. They may offer talent scholarships or maybe sports scholarships. So a lot of university funding out there. A second option for funding is external funding organizations. So organizations that, for whatever reason, have some type of invested interest in sending students abroad. Maybe it's like the Fulbright Commission, even though our scholarships are for postgraduate study. Maybe, again, they have a mission of exchange, or maybe their mission has to do with a certain ethnicity or religion, or supporting women interested in the sciences, or whatever their mission is, nationality, etc. That if you can search for these organizations, apply for the funding they're offering to support exchange. And we have links to scholarship search engines on our website in the funding section that you can go through, tick what you think you'd be eligible for, and see what type of funding comes up. On the slide we have Joel. He was a former advisee of ours. He won the Moorhead Cain Scholarship, which is a scholarship. It's an external funding body, but it's actually connected to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a great university, and he actually received full funding for his studies. Now, full funding doesn't happen, as often, but these types of scholarships are available. In a recent survey of international students in the U.S., about 1 in 3 indicated a scholarship as their primary source of funding. So something to consider as you're thinking about the U.S. Another thing to think about is that you will be able to internationalize your CV and strengthen your CV. I touched on this when I talked about on-campus activities, but when it comes to working, you should note that with a student visa, you are allowed to work up to 20 hours a week during term time on campus, and up to 40 hours a week during holiday time on campus. So that means that you will, again, be able to gain some type of work experience. Now, whether your purpose for doing that is to just gain a little bit of extra money during your time there, so you don't really mind what you're doing, maybe you're working at the gym or cafeteria or some type of on-campus facility, that's fine, you can earn some cash that way. Or maybe you decide you really want something that will stand out in your CV. Maybe you want some office experience, so you work for the international office, or you work for another academic department as a student assistant, student helper. Lots of universities have job websites just open to university students, and you apply through the jobs feature on their website, lots of student positions to fill. It's also important to know that the Council for Industry and Higher Education surveyed 230 major UK employers, and 65% of employers favored applicants with overseas work experience. So not only could you gain work experience during your time at university, but also with a student visa you are allowed to participate in something known as optional practical training. Now, optional practical training, or OPT as it's known for short, means that you're allowed to stay in the US up to a year after your studies and work in your field of study. For some of the sciences, you're allowed to stay up for 2 years. So for example, if you studied political science at a university in Washington, D.C., and you want to work in politics for a year after you finish your degree, through OPT, you may be able to do so. And that'll, again, really give you that international experience that'll help your CV stand out. The last point I want to make in this section about why should you consider U.S. study is, of course, to learn about a new culture and expand your horizons. And study abroad can really change you. It can really broaden your worldview. The U.S. spans 6 time zones, and there's such diversity in people and in culture. And so what really better way to go and explore it for yourself than to visit and study in the States. You know, you can interact with your U.S. peers, the local campus community, the town or city you're interested in, and then of course, you know, travel a bit to the different regions and really get to know for yourself, really explore that special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. Fulbright's also about exchange, so it's not just about you learning about the U.S., but the U.S. learning about you. So what it's like to be a British student, whether it's having funny conversations with your peers about accents and how you pronounce things over lunch, or whether you're talking about current events and world affairs and getting their perspective on things and they getting yours. So really, this last point, while last in my slide, I think is an important this section of the presentation, I think is an important point that you shouldn't forget. On a personal note, I've been in the UK for almost 4 years now, and I promise you I am still learning every day. So really important point to consider. Alright, so a little bit more nitty-gritty about the admissions process and about education in the US. I'm going to go over some key differences between the US and the UK that you should keep in mind as you're considering US study. The first, there are 2 types of undergraduate degrees on offer. The first is an associate's degree, or 2-year degree, that you may receive from a community college. Now, the important thing to note about an associate's degree is perhaps this is a good fit for a couple different types of students. One, a student who thinks maybe university isn't for them, but they do want another higher ed qualification. So they can go for 2 years. 2, it might be for people doing a vocational degree. So they can go to community college. They do have degrees, again, but more vocational in focus in nature. Also with community colleges, so you have some students who just go and do a 2-year associate's degree. Another type of student is a student who goes, and a lot of U.S. students actually choose to do this, is you go to a community college for a year or 2, more likely 2, and you go ahead and you get those general education classes out of the way. Remember I mentioned general education modules are those modules that you have to take from a university outside of your main area of study, those introductory classes to other subjects. And what some students do is they go to the community college, and because it's less expensive than most U.S. universities, it, in fact, can be significantly so, what some U.S. students do and what international students may do is go to a community college, take some of those general education classes, and then what a lot of community colleges have are articulation agreements with 4-year institutions. And so what students might do is do their first 2 years at a community college and then transfer to a 4-year institution and do their remaining 2 years at a university, and then they graduate with a bachelor's degree from that university. I mentioned the term articulation agreement. So what that means essentially is that if you're, for example, going to community college in Virginia, and you decide you want to go and transfer your remaining 2 years at a university, you'll find that a community college in Virginia may have agreements with lots of universities, not only within Virginia, but across the states, and that maybe you can smoothly transfer from the community college to James Madison or University of Virginia or Virginia Tech, any of the other institutions that they have a relationship with. Now, you can also transfer universities that they don't have relationships with. It's just a slightly less straightforward process, a little, not quite as smooth, but it's something to consider, especially if cost is an issue for you. It's also something to consider if you feel you might not be eligible or you did poorly at your A-levels, but you're looking to buckle down and really do well at university, because community colleges have they're more lenient in their admissions process. They might not even require you to take an admissions test. Probably not. And so, again, if you're looking for a pathway to get a bachelor's degree, this might be a good step for you. Into this webinar are interested in doing a bachelor's degree, and this will typically take 4 years at a university. Another difference to note is that law and medicine are studied at the postgraduate level in the States. A lot of students that come and use our advising services are interested in these two subjects. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that, for these two subjects, you should really take pause and really consider, is U.S. study right for me? Just because it's going to be a slightly longer process and probably more expensive process to do these two subjects in the States. That being said, there are some advantages to doing a first degree in a related subject, figuring out, do I really want to do medicine, do I really want to do law, and then going on and doing that postgraduate degree in that subject. But again, I would pause and consider that very carefully. Law, you can do a first degree in pretty much any subject, but you find most students decide to do something related like political science or international relations, and then a student will go on to do 3 years of law school. Medicine, they will study something along, again, a related subject like biology, because you have a lot of prerequisite modules you would need to take, and then you apply to medical school. And medical school, I should note, is very competitive, not just for U.S. students, let alone U.S. students, but for international students especially so. So just one more note on this, if you are interested in doing medicine in the States, after you investigate the process, see if it's a good fit for you, I would strongly consider, instead of to look at also the option of doing perhaps your medical training or your medical schooling in the UK, and then as part of your training maybe doing a residency exchange in the US. I could go on all day about law and medicine, but there's more information about these two subjects on our website. Again, just pause and think, is this a good fit for me? Now, another difference to note is that there's less government control in the U.S., which means there's more autonomy from the U.S. and U.K. governments so for universities. And so that means each university will set its own policies regarding admissions, financial aid, admissions deadlines. Each university has its own policy. So I can't say, oh yes, the deadline for all applications is X date, or all universities charge X amount. I mean, each university sets its own policy. There's, going along with that, no centralized admissions process. There is no UCAS. You are applying to each university individually. So you have to be organized and keep track of what each university expects. The application process, important thing to note about that is that it's a holistic process. And what that means is that you are not applying to a department. You are applying to the undergraduate admissions office for the university. And so when the university admissions counselor looks at your application, they will do so holistically. They will look at you as a person, not just your interest in perhaps a particular subject, but really your academics, your extracurriculars, your essays. I'll go over application components on another slide, but they really want to get to know you as a person, what you're interested in, what your goals are, why you're interested in coming to their institution. And they're really checking to make sure that you have what's known as match. Match means that they're looking to see that you're a good fit for them and that their institution's a good fit for you. So that both way, that match. And that means that the application process for U.S. universities is probably going to be slightly longer than it would be in the UK. Now, I know some students might roll their eyes at me when I say this, but I would really see it as a good thing because it's an opportunity for you to showcase more about yourself. Whereas, perhaps in UCAS, you're limited in your personal statement and what you can share and your achievements. A U.S. application, you can really go in depth and share a bit more about yourself. Here's an ideal timeline that I'll briefly go over. This is, again, the ideal timeline, but I should note that the earlier you get started on this process, the better. So if you know someone doing their GCSEs and they're already starting to think about university and U.S. study, go ahead and show them our website and get them started. Or if you are in that case, if you're already in AS levels or A levels, or it's okay, you might not fit this exact process, but you may have to work at a slightly quicker pace the later you wait. So ideally, at least a year and a half ahead of time, you would start researching U.S. education. As you're doing now, tuning into this webinar, is it a good fit for you? Then you can start researching universities and go into the choosing process. Now, I'm not going to go over choosing in this presentation, but we do have a really good section about how to choose a university on our website. Next, you can narrow down how many universities you want to apply to. You can apply to as many as you want. You're not limited. But we recommend a well-chosen list of, let's say, 5 to 6 universities, just because it is a slightly longer process. If you need to take an admissions test, which I'll go over in another slide, I would go ahead and register for those tests very early. That's because the testing centers in the UK fill up quickly, and you don't want to miss out on when you want to do your testing date. Also, it might be a good idea if you do need to take the SAT or ACT to sit it in your AS level year, because then you go ahead, you get out of the way, and then also if you do need to resit it, then you may have some time in the early autumn of your final year to resit it if you didn't quite get the score you're looking for. Also, if you're already studying for your AS levels and you're already doing revising for that, you may find then it's perhaps easier to prepare for these tests, because if you're already studying for a similar subject. But that being said, figure out what's the best fit for you and what you want to do, and just plan a schedule for yourself. I would suggest attending our USA College Day event. It's a Saturday, the 29th of September. I know it seems a long way off, or perhaps not, depending on when you're listening to this webinar, but I would just go ahead and mark that in your diary. It's a really great event. We have over 125 U.S. universities visit London, Ivy League, East Coast, West Coast, small, large, private, public, and it gives you the chance to have face-to-face time with these institutions and get sort of those burning admissions questions answered. Then I would begin the admissions process in the early autumn, the year before you'd want to apply. Before you'd want to start. And then, work towards these deadlines. You'll find some universities offer both early and regular deadlines. So if you decide to apply by an early deadline, you may find it's probably within November. And then these regular admissions deadlines tend to fall, let's say, around January or so. And again, you have to pay attention to each university because they'll each set their own deadlines. Then you'll receive your admissions decision in the early spring, and you let the university know if you'd like to attend, and if you do, you then apply for your student visa, liaising with the university. It's a very straightforward process. And then you read the pre-departure section of our website, which I know seems a long way off, but please try and keep that in mind because it's everything you'd want to know and more about studying in the U.S. And living in the U.S. And then you would typically begin studying in mid to late August, especially that first year, as you'll probably have an international student orientation and first-year student orientation. Now let's go over, we talked about why you should study in the U.S. We talked about some of the differences between the U.S. and the U.K. and your timeline. I'm just going to briefly go over, I'm very conscious of time, and briefly go over some of these application components. And once again, this is just to get you started and thinking about it. Please go onto our website or attend one of our live seminars for more in-depth information. But to get started, an application form is required from each university. Pretty much, I imagine all are online at this point. And you fill in basic information about yourself, your background, where you live, where you're from, information about your family, and again, expected from most universities. And you'll have to submit an application form for each university. You may come across a term called common application. Of the 4,000 institutions in the U.S., about 450 are signed on to the common application. It's similar to UCAS, but not it certainly isn't a UCAS. Basically what it means is that if your university you're applying to is signed on a common application, it means you just have to fill in your background details once. And then suppose if you're applying to 6 universities and 3 of them are signed on to this common application, that means for those 3 you just have to fill in your background information once. And then each of them will have their own separate questions, supplemental questions. So not really like UCAS, I mean, but it's as close as it probably is going to come in the States. But it is a bit of a time saver. Admissions tests. Most U.S. universities, not all, but most will require you to take either the SAT reasoning test or the ACT. If testing is not your thing, you really don't do well, you want to go to the U.S. but you're really worried about this, there are some universities that for whatever reason just don't agree with having tests as part of their requirements, and you can apply to some of those. There is a website, I think it's called fairtest.org, could be wrong, but you can Google it, and it lists universities that, from what I understand, don't require an admissions test, but of course you'd want to confirm with the admissions office at the university. But again, for the majority of universities, you will need to take a test. For the most competitive universities, not only will they expect either the SAT or the ACT, but they'll also expect subject tests as well. So we go in depth into explaining these tests, what's included on them, where you can take them in the UK, why they're used, how they're used on our website. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to refrain from doing that because, again, I could talk on and on about that all day. But again, please, if you decide you need to take one, register early because you don't want to get stuck, not being able to take it when you'd like. Another component to consider, a transcript. This is an official letterhead from your school that lists what marks you received in your GCSE scores, also your AS level and your predicted A level. If your school isn't sure how to produce a transcript, we do have sample transcripts on our website. So at the bare minimum, it contains your marks. But other ways that your school can help is providing some context for the university. So for example, is it competitive to get into your school? Did you have to apply to get in? How many A levels are you allowed to take? If you're restricted to only taking 3, the university needs to know that. Those types of things that can really add to the transcript and, again, provide some context for the university. But at the bare minimum, it needs your marks for the last 4 years of school. Each university will probably require 2 to 3 essays. These are short essays. They will give you a prompt, and it is very different than a UCAS personal statement. I would not try to rework a personal statement into a US admissions essay. Now you're thinking to yourself, oh gosh, I want to apply to 5 universities and each are requiring 3 essays. That's going to take me forever. Well, most US universities probably ask similar questions, so you could rework an essay a bit if need be, though I would be careful doing that, so please don't tell one university how excited you are about attending a different university. But again, you can probably, once you've come up with a certain number of essays, probably be able to rework it. Now these prompts are, again, getting to know you. So the prompt might be, what's the last book you read, or who's your role model, or comment on a difficult experience you've had. And so really it's driving to pull information about you, your character, your interests, and again, what you're interested in accomplishing through going to that university and seeing if you're a good match. We have, again, a ton of information about essays on our website. The next component, they'll probably require 2 to 3 recommendation letters, and they'll outline who they expect to write those. So maybe 2 might come from someone within your school. Maybe they allow you to submit 1 from outside of school. So they will take a look at that. If you are working with a teacher on applying, we have a ton of advice for referees and how to write for a US style recommendation letter on our website. We have you can view that as well. One thing about recommendation letters, I would suggest meeting with the teacher, writing the recommendation letter, and explaining why you're interested in going to the U.S., why those universities, what activities you're involved in that they might not know about, just to help them write that letter. Lastly, each university is probably going to require an application fee. It might be $50 to $100. So please plan ahead and think about these upfront costs as you're applying to universities. If applying to university, if the fee would be cost prohibitive, what that means is, if you would not be able to apply to that university because of the fee, some universities will waive the fee. You just need to contact them and ask what you need to do in order to get that fee waived. So how will U.S. admissions counselors make their admissions decision? What's part of their assessment process? Well, first, they're going to take a look at your academics. So what have you done over the past 4 years? Again, they'll look at your GCSEs, they will look at your AS levels, and they will look at your predicted A levels if you haven't graduated yet. And that's really the most important part. Next, they're going to look at your academic potential, again, those admissions test scores, if they require them. A lot of students, and especially parents, like to ask, what scores do I exactly need to achieve to get into Harvard, let's say? And there's no way I can answer that because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a holistic process. You have some students who maybe get perfect scores and don't get in, maybe some who don't get perfect scores and get in. There is no magic formula. Okay, so just they first look at your academics, then they'll look at your admissions test scores. Now, one way you can gauge how competitive you are is if you do take an admissions test or even take a practice one at your kitchen table, you take a practice test. You can then, receive that grade, and then most U.S. universities will actually publish what the average student who got into their university received on the admissions test, so you can kind of get a feel for where you should be admissions test-wise. When it comes to academics, you can't really directly translate U.S. marks and UK marks into U.S. grades, but you'll notice that the U.S. university will probably publish what the average grade point average is of a student entering. Now, because you can't really do that direct translation, what we provide on our website is a rough table of what your UK marks would look like in US GPA. And that's a rough tool for you to gauge your competitiveness. It is not for you to fill into the application. In fact, you'd probably just leave GPA blank, and they will judge what they typically expect from UK students and A-levels based on where you went to school, not trying to sit there translating it into US GPA. But it's a tool for you to use as you're looking at universities. Moving on, they're going to look at your extracurricular involvement. So what have you done outside of school? This is, again, a part of the holistic process. They want to put the student in context. So if you had very little to work with, if you had to do a part-time job to help support your family or babysit, or help take care of a family member, that's an outside school activity. That is an extracurricular activity. If you were able to go to a school where everything was provided for you, that you had a number of activities you could participate in, they're going to put you in context, and they're going to see, did you take advantage of that? Did you are you on a sports team? Do you participate in any clubs? Do you play piano? Do you dance, etc.? Whatever it is that you do outside of school. And so, again, this is something that they're going to look at as figuring out who you are as a person, how you're involved. Also, it's important to note there, you don't have to be on a national sports team in order to say that you play a sport. They will look at, even if you're just playing on a local team or some type of school team, that's perfectly fine to include. So they're also going to try and figure out, again, who you are as a person, and they'll gain that through the essays, they'll gain that through the extracurriculars, and also through the recommendation letters. They're trying to figure out your character and, again, help establish that match, what you're interested in, what activities, what you're looking to do, your goals, etc. So I'm going to briefly go over ways Fulbright can support you if you decide, U.S. Studies seems like it might be a good fit for me. First, please visit our website. I know I've mentioned it probably a million times in this webinar. It's www.fulbright.org.uk. We have a Study in the USA tab with everything you'd want to know and more about admissions to U.S. University. We also have events that you can look up and resources for schools. So please do have a good look around on the website. I mentioned USA College Day. Please, if you're thinking about US Study, it's a busy event for anyone who's gone before, but it's a very good event where you can meet, again, US university representatives. It is the only US university fair in the UK. We have webinars, as you probably can tell, on undergraduate study and also on specialized topics. So do have a look at the webinars page on our website. We are based in London, so we have a resource library where you can come and talk to an advisor. We are open Mondays 1:30 to 7, Thursdays 1:30 to 5:30, but I would strongly suggest having a look at our online calendar before you come in, because we occasionally do close, so please have a look on that calendar before you travel. But we are available if you want to talk to an advisor in person. After you've exhausted the website, because pretty much everything is on there, if you still have a question, you are able to phone or email us, and our contact information is on the website. We're involved in social media, so we have a US-UK Fulbright Commission page. We have a group for students heading to the US. We're on Twitter, and we give advice and updates on events on Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel where we have videos with British students talking about tips on applying for US study, admissions counselors giving tips specifically for UK students. We also have a Flickr account where we publish photos from our activities and our photo contests, so of UK students in the US and some of our events. So this is the last slide. I hope you enjoyed this Getting Started webinar. I know it's a lot of information to cover in a little amount of time. If you decide US Study might be a good fit for you, please visit our website, look at our social media pages, and if you have any questions, do get in touch. Thanks so much.